Good morning and welcome to Council Matters on this fabulous Dublin morning. And today we're going to have a focus on Fingal because I'm joined in the studio by newly elected Independent Councillor for Swords, Joe Newman. Joe, welcome to Council Matters.
Thank you very much, Michael.
And Joe, we're also going to be joined on the line very shortly by Joe's colleague, an Independent Councillor out there for Swords as well, Justin Sinnott. But in the meantime, Joe, you've just got elected in the recent May elections. How are you finding it so far? It's people are saying it's not quite what they thought it was going to be. How do you find the council business so far?
Yeah, well, I'm finding it great. I'd no great expectations. I mean, I've just as you said, been recently elected, and I see my job as to represent the people in the area, and I'll be doing that for the next 5 years. So I'd no condition or understanding of what the councillor's job was, other than to represent the community, and I'm really enjoying it, looking forward to the challenges ahead.
You're an independent councillor, which comes with different challenges in itself, Joe. Because if you were a party member, you'd probably have a lot more support. You'd have a lot more infrastructure support as well. You'd have researchers probably. How difficult is it actually doing all of those things as an individual?
Yeah, well, I've kind of become involved with a group of independents, and we're working together, and I'm finding that it's not really that hard. We can do our own research with the internet, with all the facilities, the technology that's there at the moment. It's not a big issue. Okay, yeah, no,
because I've noticed as well that certainly on South Dublin Council, there's a group of independents have got together, and this. On Dublin City Council, there's a huge group, although whether they're a group or whether it's just independent under another name is an interesting one. But Joe, the main issue that we wanted to grab you and to talk about today, well, actually there's several issues, but the first one that is very much to the fore is water charges. Now, you had some very, very interesting take on the water charge issue. Can you just share it with us, Joe? What do you see as perhaps the fundamental issue in terms of the water charges?
Well, as you said, we have put a submission together, a group of independents. We put a submission towards Irish Water, and we have had a reply to that. Basically, the issues I see is the allowance, the daily allowance for people. We need to make sure that people have a reasonable allowance to perform their daily ablutions, so on. And then I feel that possibly to charge for excessive use of water. So we definitely people need an allowance that they can use without worrying about the cause of it. And then I think over that allowance we can have the water tax to prevent wastage and encourage conservation. And I believe at the same time that the utility could actually recoup its cost that way without hurting people.
Okay. When I hear a couple of issues that come up out of that, an allowance in that sense of the word. First of all, do you accept that water charges are inevitable to a certain degree? Because we're getting all these people saying if we get into power we're going to get rid of them. My understanding is that that's part of the deal we did to get us out of the banking crisis, that the water services have to be at least taken out of public ownership. What's your understanding there, Joe?
Yeah, well, I think we pay taxes anyway. People pay income tax. We're already paying for water in one way. Now we're paying it in a different way. I think it's more focused from a local charge. From water charges, we can actually see where the money being spent, and in that way we can drive for more efficient, effective and less costly service. So I'm not against taxes. I'm against unfair taxes and inequitable.
What I've said to previous guests on this programme, Joe, is, and I would hope that it's seen in the context that it is that water charges to me are the secondary issue, in the sense that if you're going to be charged, well, that's a price issue. What I'm primarily interested in is what I would call water security and water quality. In other words, when I go to my tap, I expect water to come out of there at least 99% of the time, and I expect that water to be drinkable. Now, if I have to pay for that, I probably won't be happy. But that's the primary focus for me. Do you think other people are seeing it in that light, Joe, or are they being obliged to say, well, I should only pay 10 cents a litre when I'm being charged 12 cents? In other words, they're being focused on price because that's what gets a headline.
Yeah, well, we need clean, drinkable water coming out of our taps. We also need water for performing other functions besides drinking. So, and maybe it doesn't need to be of the same quality, but unfortunately our system
we need the
combined,
reliability, don't we?
We certainly need reliability, and where I live, we've generally had reliable water coming out, and we've taken it for granted as such at this point in time. Certainly, I believe people's behaviour can be changed with taxes, but we still need a big allowance, a reasonable allowance before that would come into play.
Okay, when I hear 150 versus 250, I'm not quite too sure where those figures are coming from, Joe, because if you were to say to me, what do you use during the day? I make cups of tea, I have showers, I do cooking, maybe use the washing machine and so on and so forth, and we've got a few people in the house. How do you, that figure that you've got of 250 versus their 150, in the final analysis, what that's going to affect would be cost. I mean, because for instance, if you use 175 or 200, then, that there's a gap there to a certain degree. But how do we determine those, Joe? I'm not trying to second guess you. I'm just wondering how those stats are derived.
Yeah, well, they come. My background is in plumbing, so I understand, water usage and things like that. And basically, I just when my shower one day, I just put a measuring cup underneath it, and I was able to establish that the shower uses about 6 litres per minute. If you go for 8 minutes to 10 minutes,
that's 50 litres.
50, 60 metres. A washing machine will use about the same, and you'll use that maybe 3 times a week, so it's average 45 litres a day. A cup of tea is 0.25 ounces, a quarter of a litre.
Okay,
so 4 cups of tea is a litre of water.
So that 150 you're talking about, is that per household?
Per person.
Or per person.
Per person, yeah.
So,
okay. It's a big allowance, I understand.
Well, what I'm saying is that what's to stop you saying, well, hold on, I've got 3 people here, but you only got 2.
Yeah, well, I think...
or what happens when you get guests?
Yeah, well, you see, we don't really know where we're going because there's, a lack of information there from the CER about water charges, tariffs, etc., But yes, exactly, how do you cope with that? And as you say, for guests and people like that. Well, certainly, I think the household charge, I think people should be, if there is a charge, there's a charge, and then there should be a credit system for people that are in the house, for older people, for sick people. We need some sort of credit system to deal with that. And I don't think CER have fully thought this through.
Yeah. A couple of points then, just listening to you talking here, that come to mind. If we're being charged, say, 150 litres or whatever, just for argument's sake, we say the price is 10 cents a litre. And I'm picking this out of the air, Joe, so don't worry too much about the stats. I know, and you know, that a certain amount of that is factored in because we lose so much water in the pipes. Do you not think somehow or other that should be focused in as well? In other words, that if we're being charged 10 cents, the chances are it's actually 5 cents is the cost because we lose 50% through wastage. Is, in your estimation, Joe, is that issue of wastage and leakage being addressed sufficiently at this time?
It's not been addressed sufficiently because I live out in Swords area, and the last 3 months we've had 3 burst pipes on a water main that's been known and been leaking for the last 20 years. The CEO of Irish Water was actually CEO of Fingal's, and he's well aware of it. There's a 40% wastage, we believe, in the mains. So yes, we're paying for wasted water. So there is a big capital investment required, and it needs to be done fairly fast. Irish Water are now being run by people in Bord Gáis. Bord Gáis are very good at keeping gas in their pipes.
Indeed.
So I would expect that they're a very professional organisation, and if the same expertise is transferred over, in a short space of time, we should have a leak-free system.
Although we would have to change probably our pipes in to a significant degree.
Oh, there's a huge amount of, outside of Dublin, it's not as antiquated as the inner city, but certainly, yes, it's a major undertaking. But Borgas have the expertise. They have piped this city from 1986 onwards with gas pipes, and they've done it very successfully. So I'm very confident that they can provide a good service. We just need and we need people to keep pushing for this to happen. Okay,
I gather we've got Justin Sinnott on the line. Good morning, Justin.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
You're very, very welcome. Justin, you're a colleague of Joe's out there in Swords. You've done some very interesting work on the issue in relation to apartment blocks and Irish water. Can you tell us what have you discovered there, Justin?
Yeah, myself and members of the Apartment Owners Network, which is a body which was set up by apartment owners many years ago to work on issues around apartments. And you know, what we've been doing and the network's been doing is trying to get just a basic answer as to how apartments will be treated. And so far, what we've got back is that there's no decision being made on apartments, and that effectively what's going to happen is that apartment residents will be charged a flat rate. You know, and what's difficult for us is that most apartments built in the last 10 years, certainly the apartments built during the boom, they would all be able to be metered individually anyway. And the issue that what's been constantly sent back to us is that we can't meter. Frankly, that's incorrect, and there's just a lack of will there to do that, because you know it's a big problem for us, because in a sense, you know, there's no certainty as to how apartment owners will be charged in the future. Will it be by square footage? Will it be by the number of bedrooms? So there's so many questions that we've asked over the last 12 months that we just simply haven't got an answer to.
So what are you saying, Justin, is that apartments are going to be treated differently from single residents, and that there seems to be some administrative rather than a technical reason for doing this? Is that, have I interpreted you correctly?
Essentially, that's what it is. What will happen to apartment residents, including myself, is that we will get an estimated bill, and we'll be expected to pay that. So it takes no account of how much water I'm going to use or anyone else will use. So that's essentially essentially the issue we have. So,
I'm also thinking as well, and I'll bring Joe in on this. It seems as though water is going to be treated quite differently from other utilities. In other words, you wouldn't do that for electricity, you wouldn't do that for gas, and you certainly wouldn't do it for the phone. Justin?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it is that. And again, what I've made and what Joe's made in our own submission to Irish Water is that, you know, apartment residents, we're being treated as second-class citizens here. We are probably the fastest growing group during the Celtic Tiger. You know, they were quick enough to build apartments across the city. But when it comes to actual basic services, that, you know, apartment owners don't just pay property tax, but they also pay management fees as well. And the fact of the matter is this, is that if NTL and Sky and all the different services of each of us in apartments guess if they can actually do it first, there's absolutely no reason why, you know, we can't be treated the same as regular residents.
Is this, Joe, is this something that's regularly coming up with your supporters and residents out there in Swords?
Yeah, as regards the apartments,
indeed, yes.
Of course there is, well, there's still a lack of information, so they still don't know. They're kind of in the dark at the moment. Apartments in the old days where just one pipe ran into them to service all of the things, so it's not too easy to actually meter them, you know. But at the same time, I think everybody will expect to be metered down the road.
Yeah, just on that one, Joe, because Irish Water, we can say a great deal of things about them, and I'm not going to knock them, but one of the things, they have a massive opportunity here to actually set a new benchmark for customer service. In other words, over the years, if you like, Irish public utilities didn't necessarily have a great reputation for being customer orientated. It seems that Irish Water have a fabulous opportunity to go in there and set a completely new standard by treating everybody as an individual customer and providing a good service to everybody. But listening to what Justin is saying, it seems that they're too eager just to get up and running, that we'll carry inefficiencies just to get it up and running. Is that being unfair on them, Joe?
No, I think you're 100% right there. They have actually rushed into it, and for whatever reason, between the strike and everything else that's happened in the country, I can understand that to a point. I've had some dealings with Irish Water with regards to the water meter installation in the area, and each time I've spoken to them, they have been very, very supportive, very helpful, and have responded. So I'm fairly confident in that. Although I've seen an article in the paper from John Mullen, from a previous CEO of Borgosh. He's not very complimentary of the organisation. He's saying there's a lack of communication and leadership there. So from that point of view, you'd have concerns as to what the issues are really there within Irish Water.
Indeed. Justin, on that, just on another note, and I just, my experience from in days gone by, I used to work for British Telecom when they had the old style exchanges before they switched over to electronic exchanges. Now, they used to tell us as employees that 75% of the meters were inaccurate, some in their favour, mostly in their favour. How confident are you about these meters that Irish Water are putting in?
Well, what they tell us is that the meters they're putting in are state of the art. They're the best that they can get.
They're hardly going to say otherwise, are they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose in that respect, you'd have to take them on their word on that. The issue will be is when people come to pay a bill and when they see the actual water usage, and then the problem will be, okay, there's a dispute between what Irish Water is saying we owe and what we're actually going to pay. And I suppose there is the problem I have, and Joe has mentioned this before as well, is that it's the actual right of appeal. It's not strong enough, and there is. I mean, I know the consumer agencies have all come out and said that needs to be stronger. There needs to be a lot more robust. Because I think the idea is of €25 rebate for that type of thing. It's a difficult one at this stage because we don't know what's actually going to happen. No one's actually paid a bill yet, and we're kind of speculating. But I just think, as Joe said as well, is that there's a bit of a rush too on this one. Remember, the bottom line in this one, you need to always understand is that this measure is not just about protecting the environment. In fact, the environment's an afterthought. This is a measure that was introduced as part of the deal with the Troika.
Indeed.
It was signed up by the previous government and implemented by this government. So, you need to really focus in on the fact that this is an additional tax that if it came down to it being an environmental measure, it's very difficult actually to be against it. But as it stands now, and with the leaks that are in the system, and I know my own estate has had an experience whereby one apartment block has massive leaks. That all comes back to how bad construction was and how bad the planning was back during the boom. And I see that's the issue here. We're actually picking up that tab.
Yeah, you probably heard that one too, Joe. I mean, I've had plenty over the years people coming to me saying, well, they were a bit lax with developers, that people were that estates were put up on the basis that Irish Water or some entity was going to come in 3 or 4 years down the track. Now, I've certainly heard one up in the Callester area where they were told, we can't do anything until Irish Water comes in. And that was 2 years ago. Do you think that, if you like, the consumer or the electorate were really caught as a piggy in the middle there while central government and local government argued amongst themselves over issues?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that's happening all the time. We're caught as pig in the middle. With regards to just back on the metering there, there's an issue with the metering, and I'll come back to your question in a second. The metering issue is, one of the issues is they're under the ground, and it's very hard to read.
Okay.
I mean, I went out there yesterday to try and read it. You nearly need a kind of a pair of binoculars to actually find out what your usage is, because they were saying beforehand that people will now be able to read their meter and to manage what their usage is. But unless you have a pair of binoculars and you go outside,
what is it going to be like? The old gas man comes round and reads your meter? I thought they were going to be able to do this electronically.
Well, they are doing it electronically, but and they will scan it and it is done. But if you want to read it yourself personally, I can walk outside, read my gas meter.
Yes, exactly.
I can check the usage,
electricity meter
and
as
I can. But the water one is under the ground, so that's going to have to be brought above ground. But your point there about the local government and councils and things like that, there's been a terrible, we've had self-regulation brought in here, and that has caused huge issues as to bad design on, say, buildings, new build, and in estates. And I'd like to see that brought back more, to have some sort of inspectors from the council accountable and responsible for monitoring those situations.
Yep. I want to move on because we might have lost Justin on the line, but I wanted to move on, Joe. This week, Fingal Council, you addressed the issue, is the way I will put it, of property tax. Just update the listeners as to what happened and what did you decide?
Well, we had a meeting yesterday in Malahide Castle, and the 15%, was the majority voted in favour of reducing the property charge by 15%. I was one of that majority, and I did it on the basis that the Irish people are being hammered left, right and centre. They're in despair. I was knocking, as I went around the doors, my manifesto was built on what people said. I didn't come up with a manifesto, and what I was hearing on the doors, that people were really despaired about the way things were going and the way money's been taken out of their pockets. Indeed. And in order to try and give some hope back to people, I have voted. I looked at the figures from Fingal. I did it in a responsible way, and I voted against. I voted for a reduction of 15%. I think it was 2 to 1/3, and certainly that was for this year.
Something, and again, going back to the property tax now. As I said earlier, I have probably a slightly different view on the water charges, in the sense that I can be a bit more dispassionate about it. But I had grave philosophic issues, which I put to people over the years, since this was introduced or mooted, that the local property tax, to me, was a definition changer, because when you bought your house, Joe, and when I bought my house, it was considered our home. I bought that for us to bring up a family and live in and all of that. And then when you're getting to just about to pay off your mortgage, you discover that wasn't your home at all, Joe. That was a property investment. And personally, I just find that difficult to take. I never invested in property. If I wanted to invest in property, I'd go off and speculate like all those other chancellors did, and some people made. But I bought a home, and you bought a home, and now I just find this is just. I won't say it's cheating, but it's a bit like moving the goalposts, I find, on that one. So that's why I'm not over the moon about you giving me 15%. I'm not even too sure I should be charged for anything in that sense.
Yeah. Well, I think we must have gone to the same philosophical school, but my manifesto is basically to try and abolish the property tax. We certainly don't agree with it in its present guise. Like yourself, I bought a house in the 70s, and I pay more in property tax than I paid for my house.
Indeed.
And lots of people have bought a house. They've built a home. It's a home, not a house. They've built security around themselves for their old age, and lots of things that's going on is about security. And I certainly feel that we need to look at that and change it. And if you want to discuss the reasons for it, I think why the government have introduced that.
Sorry, I think we've got Justin back on. Justin, tell me this, Justin. Did you invest in property, or did you buy a home?
I bought a home. I bought during the boom. I'm originally a south sider, and I moved out to the north side 7 years ago. So, I bought a home. I'm in negative equity, as like many other people in my generation. I'd like to move on to a house, but that's just the way it is.
I've described this, and I know it's probably being a bit dramatic. Of somebody comes along and mugs you and takes your wallet and says, "You're a good bloke. I'll give you 10 quid back." That seems to me the way this 15% deduction. I mean, why not just strike a rate and be done with it? It seems to me that this 15% is as much PR as it is economics, or even more so. How do you feel about that, Justin?
Well, you're right in one sense. The 15% is a completely arbitrary amount that was decided on by central government. The 15% is the power that we have to cut it. So that's unfortunately where we're at. We would like to, in my own view, similar to Joe, is that this is an unfair tax. I mean, frankly, what I find absolutely appalling is the fact that we said that because we relied so much on construction and property that we'd never do it again. But here we are, we're actually putting 15% of my council's income dependent on property value. You know, people who bought paid stamp duty, people who are negative equity, because the fact is it's a notional value anyway. And the fact is, you know, and the fact is people like myself still have a mortgage to pay. So the value that's beside our house, our apartments, is actually a value in the clouds. It doesn't actually represent the reality of what we actually are paying back to a bank. So I have a real issue with it, with the fundamentally how it's actually administered. There's a reason why people like me, myself and Joe, voted for the cut last night. There's a number of reasons. I mean, we both put it on our pledges when we ran for the local elections. And the fact is that politics in this country has got a very bad rep over people and parties making pledges and then in power and saying, actually, you know what, I can't do that. So for me, it was a red line issue. And I suppose, I mean, there was arguments last night in terms of protecting homeless services, but just let's remember this, that central government have taken 15 million euros in housing grants off Fingal County Council. That's what they've done. This government wants to cut development levies, which will basically even cut income for councils further. And this government wants to get rid of the social housing provision as part of its Construction 2020 plan. So it's a bit rich to blame councillors for the homeless crisis, frankly.
Just, I want to finish off with Joe. Joe, going back to water charges now, you've made some very good representations, which I saw what yourself and Justin have put in the North County Leader. What can councillors do other than make representation within the council now? Aren't Irish Water in a position where they've got a monopoly and that they can say, well, yes, we've heard you now, Joe, but we're still going to strike this rate? Is it that negative? Or
well, that's negative. I don't think that way. The way I think is I'm there, I feel I can change things. That one person can change the world, and we're not trying to change the world, but I firmly believe, and I'm determined, that to have some impact in the 5 years tenure, along with other independents, we firmly believe we can affect change, and we're going to work towards that change.
Yes, Justin, I give you the last word. Property tax, is it with us? Is it with us forever now, or might we see it being a major issue come the 2016 general election if it doesn't happen before that?
You can be absolutely sure to be an issue in the general election. What is interesting is the positions taken by Fianna Fáil and Sinn Féin. They are saying they're committed to abolishing this tax. So, you know, if they're elected into government, will they actually back that pledge up? So, it's a major issue. Okay. I can say it will be central to the 2016 election.
Okay, I'm going to have to say goodbye to everybody.